Thank you for choosing LDC to become a driving instructor. The reason I've done this video is to help you understand, or to give you really a quick overview of how the course works. But in particular, I want to focus on the box of materials that you have received. In the past, a few of our students, understandably, when they see the box and they see the content, I think, wow, there's an awful lot of stuff here to be able to become a driving instructor. Well, I'd like to show you that it's not as daunting as it may first appear. So on my left here, I do have a box in front of me, and you'll notice that there are quite a number of materials. There's something called binder 1. There's a binder 2, binder 3, and then there's the LD system, workbooks and videos, a notepad for you to actually write notes, a highway code, and the official DVSA skills, or driving skills, driving the essential skills. And you have a presenter. Now, when you first look at this, you think, my goodness, there's an awful lot of information to go through. But in fact, there's not as much as it may seem. First of all, virtually the full contents of binder 2 are various documents and books, something called the Student-Centered Learning Guide, Teaching Driving Manual, How to Deliver the LD System, DVSA National Standards. All of this is reference information, and how much you go into this is really, to a large extent, up to you. Now, to begin with, you don't really need most of the information here, but there will be other references to it, so it's up to you if you wish to delve into this. So at this stage, you can put binder 2 really back in the box. That's not really going to involve you at this stage. So that leaves us really with binder 1. And binder 1, if you open it up, you'll see that there's a series of modules, and they go from, admittedly, they go from 1 right through to 48, and then there's a booklet about the motor car for those of you that you need to have a basic understanding of car mechanics. Not a great deal, but there is actually a nice booklet that we've given you there to help you get to grips with that, which will help you answer some of the questions that you find in the part 1 test. Although the vast majority of questions in part 1 are really to do primarily with the highway code. So what you need to do is, first of all, don't panic. Do speak to us. So we will try to arrange for one of our departmental staff to speak to you and go through things with you and check that you've got everything that you need. That's one of the reasons why you need to look at the very first element here, which is called the course guide. Quite a small book. And the reason you need to look at it is, first of all, just to check. It's in here. It will outline to you the contents of the box. And the first thing for you to do is check that the contents of the binder have in fact been received. Don't worry about reading everything that's in here at the moment, but just make sure you have what you need. Now, there is no need for you to read everything that's in these binders. In fact, these binders, a lot of the information that's in them has actually been written by me, and it's based on about 35 years experience of being in the industry. So you really don't need to understand everything in here to become a driving instructor. You may choose after 30 years to read all this. So this is not only going to be useful to you while you're training to be a driving instructor, it will actually be useful to you once you are a driving instructor, because it basically covers virtually everything there is to know about the human condition and how we learn and how to apply that understanding in the context of being a driving instructor. So you've got virtually everything you need, you know, if you like, for a lifetime of being a driving instructor. So that's the first thing to know, that it's effectively a teacher training course. It's a massive teacher training course, but you don't need to actually go into that much detail at this stage. For those of you that are interested, obviously you can go into the detail, but it's not compulsory. What you need to do is concentrate on these basic modules first of all in this part one binder. So if you read through the course guide, it will give you an overview of the course. It will tell you what's in the pack. It will give you an overview of the part 2 and the part 3 training steps. And when we talk to you over the phone, we'll ask you to make sure that you actually have at least read through that. And if you've got any questions on that, you know, that would be the time to ask for help. If you get stuck, if you have problems with dyslexia or anything like that, then just bring that to the officer's attention, and we'll work with you to try to work around that. So we're not saying you have to be an academic to be able to be a good driving instructor. The most important thing is for you to want to actually do the job and genuinely enjoy helping people and help people grow and be successful, in this case, in terms of learning to drive and hopefully to become a safe driver for life. So that's the most important thing, for you to be motivated to want to do that is the first thing. The next thing is that you have to enjoy helping people, because that's a big part of the job. So that means you need to have empathy, you need to appreciate people, you need to be patient and understanding. So they're the key requirements to be a driving instructor. What we need here is just to provide you with a framework within which you can develop those skills and pass each of the exams. Part 1 itself, although yes, if you studied all this binder, you would learn all the knowledge you would need to pass part 1. You don't need to study this binder to pass part 1, because you can go online and we have already got the questions that you're likely to be asked as part of that part 1 test. So in fact, if you just go through and practice the tests and learn the questions and memorize the questions, many of which you'll already know the answers to because you're already an experienced driver. You've also got experienced life, so some things will be common sense and be obvious to you, which of the options. So as far as part 1 is concerned, what we always, although you can study all the materials, what we advise you to do is actually just get straight onto the learning portal that we set up for you, log in and actually start answering the theory test questions and go through the whole data bank of questions that you potentially are likely to come across on your part 1, and also start studying the videos and go through the hazard perception side, because part 1 is not too dissimilar from what learner drivers have to pass now as part of their theory test. So you don't really need to have a vast amount of knowledge. You can actually just concentrate on doing those questions. If you get the answer wrong, there is a link so you can find out a bit more background information that pertains to that question that would then help you answer it. But you only need to do that for those questions that you found that you struggled with or that you needed some help with. Otherwise, you can just plow through them fairly quickly. So that's how we would suggest that you go through part 1. We also would recommend to you that you do start the binder work here as well. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 48 modules for you to go through. But most of the modules, believe it or not, just relate to the driving lessons in the driving skills workbook. So in the driving skills workbook, you have effectively about 22 driving lessons or topics that you can learn. And if this provides you with a fantastic framework of how to actually do the job, because this is, if you like, based on years and years of practice of actually helping people to be able to pass the driving test and also to become a safe driver for life. So by following the framework that's within here, then you will get all the knowledge and understanding that you need to become effectively a driving instructor. So, and not only is it in words in here, it's actually also on video. So I know not everybody has a DVD, but it's also on the portal. So if you can get online to the portal, you can still see these same videos. So for every one of these lessons, there is a video that goes with it. And the video basically shows you best driving practice and explains all the key learning points that relate to actually delivering that particular lesson. So the first lesson is not surprisingly moving off and stopping. So everything you need to understand about moving off and stopping in terms of what you need to teach is covered on the video. It's then covered in the workbook, in that you've actually got the information here as well for you. And then on top of that, there's a little quiz that you can answer, although you will probably find it very easy to answer the questions because it's really designed for a learner. But it'll also give you a list of activities that if you were teaching somebody this particular aspect of driving, what you might do to help them develop the skill. So in a nutshell, this is the core of what you need. So you don't need to worry massively about all the other materials in here. This is the core. However, when you get to a point where you need to go on a trainee license or indeed teach for free, it is important that you actually go through each of the early modules that relate to those lessons. And all each of these modules do basically, because the title, look, you can see this one here says, look, emergency stop, lesson 5. So that's emergency stop, lesson 5 in this book. The objectives are almost identical for every one of the modules, which is basically have a look at the workbook, answer the questions, read it, watch the video, look at the targets that you're supposed to achieve, look at your own driving and consider whether you would be able to mark each of those targets have been complete. And if you look at the actual targets themselves, for example, if we look at the one here, which is the emergency stop, which is lesson 5. There you go, lesson 5. You know, I know the difference between thinking distance, braking distance, and overall stopping distance. So that's some theory that you need. Do you know what those are? I know what might prevent the car from stopping within the overall stopping distance published in the highway code. So that's things like the rain, or whether it's frosty, that would actually just stopping within the distance that you would normally expect a car to stop. So it's fairly straightforward. And I feel confident in my ability to do these things. So you have to have that understanding. Well, you have to make sure you have that understanding because you want your pupils to ultimately have that understanding. You've also got to be able to perform these tasks exactly like you would expect your pupils to perform them, but obviously you'd want to perform them more effectively. So you need to be able to demonstrate them. So you'd need to be able to do those. So this is why this book, even though it is for learner drivers, works perfectly for you. If you like, the way you need to look at it is that you are both the driving instructor and the pupil. So as you go through this book, you pretend yourself, look at yourself as being the pupil learning to drive. Now, I know you can learn to drive, so you can say, well, why do I need to learn to drive when I can already do it? Because this is what you will ultimately have to do with your pupils. So you need to start to understand the detailed knowledge and understanding and targets and types of activity that you need to perform to actually achieve those particular tasks. So by going through this, you can also at the same time start to evaluate your own driving. Does your own driving meet the standards that are in here? And if in any doubt, then don't mark these targets. If you are confident you can do these things, do by all means tick them, and then transfer the results to something called the master progress check, which is there. So there's 10 targets for getting moving. For the emergency stop, there were 7 targets. So if you tick each of the items on there, no, you probably can't see that very well. Tick up the 7 items on there as you're able to prove them. When you come to see your trainer, if you've managed to cover every one of those lessons there, you'll be able to show your trainer where you feel your own driving needs to potentially be improved. And if you're still not certain from just going through the early sections of what you need to improve, then at the back of this book is exactly what the driving examiner is looking for. And you are tested in exactly the same way as a learner driver. So you're at the back here, you actually have a section which is actually about the driving test. And what it does is it goes through everything that the examiner is checking about your driving. And it tells you whether or not the examiner would mark a fault in any of those areas on the marking sheet. And it explains to you why a fault might be recorded and what is driving good practice, what they would expect to see from not only a learner driver, but from you. Now, unlike a learner driver that can make up to 15 driving faults on a test, you can only make 6. So your driving has got to be more comprehensive than your learners. So you've also got this information here, which tells you precisely what the examiner is looking for. So that's what it actually is in this section. You can see it says what the examiner is looking for. So you've got in this book, you've got all the information you need to know in terms of what you're going to teach or pass on to your students once you're doing the job for real. It actually shows you the activities that you might conduct within a driving lesson. And from that, you should be able to figure out the sort of locations or areas where you might conduct these particular lessons. So everything you need to start to develop yourself as a driving instructor is effectively contained in here. And once you've gone through all these lessons and you've watched all the video items and you've done all the quizzes, then it's time for you to think about planning how to improve your driving for part 2, which is there. And the way we work, as you probably realize, we have something called student-centered learning, which basically means you virtually teach yourself. And the way you do that is by, first of all, setting a goal for yourself, and you try to set out a plan for yourself. We will then help you and aid you in that process in terms of helping you figure out what it is that you need to be doing next and how you might go about it. But we'd like you to have a first stab at doing that, because ultimately you are going to become a driving instructor. So ultimately, this is something you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be able to plan a lesson once you're actually doing the job for real. So why not start it now, planning your own development, ready for your part 2 driving test. Now that's all coming back to the modules here. Like I said, this module, this example here is the emergency stop. For every lesson in here, there is basically a module in here. And as all the modules say is do what I've just said. Get this book. This is the main study reference. It does give you other study references. So it does give you references. So anything to do with the emergency stop, the rules that relate to that, it actually tells you here so that you can actually read the rules in the highway code at the same time. It also gives you references to driving the essential skills, the DVSA book, again, in the area where that covers emergency stops in this case. But it doesn't matter which lesson it is, it goes through every lesson. So you watch the video, you use the workbook, you follow up the references and read the highway code, you follow up the references and read the section to do with driving the essential skills. And as you're doing that, you're obviously building up the knowledge that you will need to be able to pass on to your students. So that's how it really works. So the main modules here that are important are the ones that relate to you actually doing the job and doing the lessons. And if you look at the lessons, it's actually getting moving, gears, steering, coordination, the emergency stop, straight line reverse, reverse to the left, pull up and reverse, bay park, turn to the road, hazard perception and basic junctions, crossings, emerging from busier roads, roundabouts, traffic signals, pedestrian crossings, hazard perception, defensive driving. So all these subjects here, you've got to become expert in, because this is the information you're going to be passing on to your students. So that's why this is valuable. But before you can go on something, if you want to train with us and come on a trainee license to get ready for part 3, which is something you would do after you pass your part 2 driving test, then you have to fill out something called an ADI 21T, which you don't need to worry about at the moment. But what they will ask you to do is fill out the hours against those headings that I've just mentioned there, to say what studying have you done, what have you completed in regard to that. So as you're actually doing the studying, you need to start noting down the number of hours that you spent, say, on the emergency stop lesson, or on the roundabouts lesson, or on one of the other lessons as part of the preparation in the Binder 1 work. So that's 80% of what's in Binder 1 is simply to do with the driving lessons that are in the driving skills workbook. And that's it in a nutshell. Yes, you could actually go through this, and you can go through all this information, and by the end of it, you would have all the knowledge you would need to pass part 1. But we don't want you to take that long passing part 1, so we would recommend you go straight onto the learning portal, do the quizzes. By the time you've gone through all the official questions, you will be ready to take part 1. That can be done in a few weeks. Literally in a few weeks from now, you could be passing and taking your part 1 and getting ready for part 2. Don't wait till you pass part 1 to start part 2. Start doing this studying straight away. Start examining your own driving and identify where you think you might be weak. In other words, try to teach yourself how to become a better driver than you currently are. And you've got all the information and the means here to be able to compare on the video. Do I drive like this? If you don't, then you need to. Do I drive like it says in the driving essential skill? If you don't, you need to. Do I drive like it says in the driving skills workbook? No. Well, you need to eventually. Now, because the DVSA needs you to log all the training hours that you are required to do, we have this third binder, which is called your skills development logbook. And this is where you would actually make notes, record how many hours you were spending on each of these topics. So as you can see here, you can see that probably, but all the modules that are in Binder 1 are listed there. But in particular, you can see a lot of them relate to the driving lessons in the driving skills workbook. So as you do the studying, what we want you to do is gradually tick off these, and we need you to note the number of hours that you're spending either on the project work, because you'll see each one of these has a little project for you to do. You'll see study references. So when you've actually read the study references, note the amount of time and the date. When you've read the brief, which is the description of the lesson, then when you've watched the video, or when you've done the quiz. So if you start noting down the hours and the dates as you actually go through each of the driving lessons in here, you're actually building up the information that you will need ultimately when you apply for a trainee license, if you choose to go down that road. But even if you don't choose a trainee license, when you go for your part 3, your part 3 examiner is going to want to look at your logbook. You will want to see that you look like you've actually gone through a proper course, which you obviously will have done if you're using LDC. You've gone through a proper training course of lessons, and you've noted the hours and the amount of time that you put into it. So that's why you start to fill out this in this logbooks. There is a separate video to do with this skills development logbook as well, to explain precisely in more detail how that works, and it also gives you an overview of how the course works as well, because this basically is your journey. This is actually recording your journey to becoming a driving instructor. So that's what Binder 3 is. So yes, you do need Binder 3 fairly quickly, because you're going to record the hours that you're doing as you go through the modules, as you go through the driving skills workbook, as you watch the videos, as you actually follow the highway code references, as you read the appropriate sections of driving the essential skills so that you can record that information for later on, because you'll need that certainly before you take your part 3, but it will also be useful to you if you decide you want to go on a trainee license after passing part 2, in which case we need to have recorded and have proven information that you covered the topics that are actually listed in these modules. So these topics in these modules, you have to show that you've actually done some studying around these topics and put some time and effort into learning about this type of thing, learning about these driving lessons, into learning about the information that backs up each driving lesson. So that, in a nutshell, really is the course. So you can see from this that the core of the course really is Binder 1, Binder 3, the driving skills workbook, and these other books. And it's not as horrendous as it seems. If you just start at module 1 and gradually start to work your way through, you will find it's not as difficult as you might imagine. For part 1, as I've said, you don't need to start studying anything. You just get straight onto the hub, start doing the questions, start with the hazard perception test, and as soon as you're scoring high marks on those tests, then you're ready to do your part 1. And I would do that because we don't want to delay your development, so you can get that out of the way quickly. You can then breathe easily. You've done the theory. You can then start to focus on doing the rest of the binder work, because even while you're waiting for your part 1, you might as well get cracking on with the binder work, start learning about these lessons, start evaluating your own driving. And in the meantime, you will be contacted by the office, you will be contacted by the trainer. So at any point you're doing this work, you can meet with the trainer. So you don't need to finish any of this work before you meet the trainer. The first thing you can do, if you want, is actually meet the trainer. So if you'd like to meet the trainer, you could even leave everything in the box if you wanted to, and wait till you meet the trainer and take the box with you to meet the trainer. And then the trainer can basically just explain what I've tried to explain to you, to make you realize that it's perhaps not as daunting or as worrying as you might imagine. I haven't explained what this is about. This is what we call a presenter. And you use dry marker pens with this, and this will help you explain things to your pupils in the car. So that's what that document is all about, and that will help you. And you'll see that ties in with the LD lessons as well, the lesson topics. So for every LD lesson, you have some pages that you can use to help you explain the information and understanding that your students will need to have for any particular driving lesson. Now, before I finish, because I have let them bind it out completely, which I said put away at the beginning, but you can't do it. But there is binder 2, and that includes a lot more reference materials. As I said, there's 30 years worth of work in there, 30 years worth of expert knowledge about operating as a driving instructor. In fact, not only operating as a driving instructor, but actually operating as a great facilitator of learning. So everything in here would equally apply to a comprehensive teacher training course. So you've got the knowledge in here easily as equal to what you would get on a teacher training course that you perhaps might have to study and go away to a college for 3 years. But just because all that information is here doesn't mean that you have to learn all this information to be a driving instructor, as we've just spoken about. You can get to being a driving instructor with what we talked about earlier. But there will be references to these materials, and especially if you're like me, academically orientated, then you might want to look in more detail at some aspects, understand some of the science behind how we learn, and understand how teachers prepare lesson plans and what's important to make a good lesson, aims and objectives, different types of teaching technique like question and answer technique, explanations, how to be an effective communicator. So there's loads of other stuff in here for you to use. But you mustn't be feeling, oh God, I've got to learn all this stuff, because you don't. But it is there, and quite a few students, if you ask on the students group, you'll see that some of them have maybe skim read this and then come back to it later. And you'll find that some people, even after they've qualified, and perhaps before they go for their first standards check, actually dip back into this again, just to remind themselves of what's involved in being a top class trainer within our industry. So I'm sorry if I frightened you with a lot of this information. You know, I am the guilty party, because most of this has been written by myself personally and researched by myself, although some of it's also been jointly with other people as well. You know, do, and some of it's actually not even not mine at all. Some of this is actually from the DVSA, like the National Standards for Driver and Rider Training. That's their document. That's not my document. I've not written that at all. So hopefully that may have reassured you that the course is not as difficult as you may seem. And as I say, if you're really worried, speak to the office, put a post up on Facebook, or contact the office with a view to meeting the trainer, and then meet your trainer, and he can talk to you. You know, whatever you do, don't pick up the box and think, oh my goodness, look at all this. Oh, I'll never be able to do this. This is a lot more than I ever expected. But I'll do it. I'll think about it later, and put it in a cupboard and never get started. The important thing is just to get started. And if that means simply putting the box in the corner and getting straight onto the hub and starting to answer theory test questions and as perception clips, then do that. Just get yourself started. Don't worry too much about what's involved down the line. It will become apparent to you. And as you want to deliver an excellent, say, lesson on roundabouts, you will instinctively want to know more about roundabouts. And it's in the workbook. It's on the video. So you've got the information there. And you won't want to look stupid to your pupil. You wouldn't want to be embarrassed by not understanding what the rules are of the road or anything in a particular lesson. So once you're actually going out there, planning a lesson, thinking about the routes and where you might do it in the area that you might want to do it, then all of a sudden there's information which seems like a big bind at the moment, you will definitely want to have an understanding of, because you're now going to impart that to somebody else. And you don't want to be getting it wrong. And you certainly don't want to be getting it wrong when you're on your part 3, because not surprisingly, if you tell a student something that's incorrect, then the examiner, that's you probably going to fail that part 3 simply because you're showing the examiner you even lack the knowledge to be a driving instructor, because the depth of your understanding is ridiculously shallow. So you do have to put in the effort. There's a lot more involved than a lot of people do initially appreciate, and we recognize that. But don't let that put you off, because if you enjoy helping people, you know, you'll be surprised. A lot of the stuff that's in there about learning and teaching, you will probably already be able to do. You're probably already doing it without even knowing it. You know, things like question and answer technique, you're probably already using it in your day-to-day life when you're helping your friends, you know, solve problems and things. You probably instinctively do it already. So don't get hung up on the labels or the names that are given to a lot of these techniques, because a lot of the things when it comes to helping a person, you know, the chances are you've already had that experience, and if you're good at helping people, then you naturally already have got what it takes to some degree. So I do hope that's reassured you. I felt the need to produce this video because if you look on our Facebook page, you'll see quite a few of our new students one of the first things they say is, oh my God, look at this box, look at all this information. How am I going to manage? Oh my goodness. And the last thing we want to do is put you off before you even start. So I hope I've done enough to reassure you that it's not as daunting as you might imagine. You have support. You've got support from the training department. They will talk to you about whatever you need to know. You have support from a trainer. We do also encourage you to quickly come on some workshops. The workshops will add a lot of the information you need as part of those workshops, and they will get you into the swing of what's involved in modern day teaching, which is much more student centered than it is teacher led, which is a much more old fashioned and traditional way. So even though we're called driving instructors, that doesn't mean that your job is primarily about barking out instructions to somebody to tell them what to do. It's actually a much more subtle process than that, and much more interesting, because there'd be nothing more boring than if you had a list of standard instructions that you could give for a lesson and you did that for every pupil robotically. That would make the job really, really boring. But it's not, because everybody is different. Everybody's knowledge that they bring is different. So the first thing you have to understand is the student. How much do they already know? Well, straight away, how are you going to find that out? Well, guess what? You're going to use something called question and answer technique. You're going to ask them questions. What do you know about this already? And that may lead on to other questions so that you can find out where is the gaps in their knowledge, where is the gaps in their understanding. And then you can target those gaps. So instead of giving them a long presentation, which covers all the information you know about roundabouts or whatever it might happen to be, which will just go straight over their head more often than not and bore the life out of them, you need to start targeting the information that you provide to your students to what they actually need. That's the key to it. As you'll see when you come to part 3, helping the students set their own goals and finding their needs is key to being a successful driving instructor. That way you can home in at the level of support or the type of techniques that you use to absolutely pinpoint what is going to help that student most effectively in terms of them developing their driving skill. So that's gives you an idea of where you're going. As I say, there is another video on Binder Free, so you can obviously watch that as well, or you can wait until you're a bit further into it and you want to start to think about what's involved. All the documents are also on the hub, so as well as being in hardcore copy fashion, you will also see that they exist on the hub. So if you prefer to read online rather than reading books, then you can do. And for every one of those modules, there is also a video. So every module is introduced with a short video. So you do have a video as well to go with each of the modules. So hopefully that's reassured you. If not, please get on the phone, ring up the training department, and if you have any concerns, you have any doubts, you have any worries, let us know. Because the last thing we want you to do is give up. And that's not what we want. We want you to carry on. We want you to be there. We want you to be successful. At the end of the day, we're primarily doing this because we hope the experience that you'll have with us will be so good that you will eventually decide that you want to become an LDC driving school owner or franchisee at the end of it. That's what our main objective is, and you'll join our band of merry men. We are a bit like a family. We all are mad keen on quality tuition. We're all passionate about facilitating learning and about understanding human behavior. And we hope that you're the same. And if that is you, and you get a lot of pleasure from helping others and helping them succeed, then we'd like to think that you will eventually join us and become one of our team members for many years to come, because that's what we're That's what we're really aiming for as part of operating this training. Unbeknown to you, you probably won't realise this, and why would you? But we don't really make a profit from the instructor training side of our business. It actually is a little bit of a lost leader. And it's because we need to feed the franchise to find new people. And not just any old new people, because we don't really like to recruit existing driving instructors, because to be perfectly honest, the standard of either their professionalism or their quality of instruction is usually very lacking, and is not anywhere near what we would want from our members. And therefore, the best way for us to ensure that we have that quality is for us to train them ourselves in the way that we know will actually deliver effective results for your students, and deliver great customer service, which will ultimately make sure your business is successful. Because once you've been operating for 6 months or so, your long-term success and security is really down to the recommendations you get. And if you do a good job, guess what? You get recommendations. If you don't, then you'll find that you'll be struggling, and you'll be always struggling for work. At the moment, there's a lot of work about, because there is about 500,000 people who wanted to learn to drive during the COVID years, who haven't been able to do it and are now coming onto the market. So at the moment, we are flush with learners, but eventually we will get back to normality. And when we get back to normality, being good at what you're doing will be important. You know, even when we had our times back in 2008, when we had the bank crash, the instructors that were good were always busy. You know, it was the others that struggled more than the quality instructors. The quality instructors almost bulletproof their business by being into quality. So if you're into quality, we hope you would join us, and then you will stay with us going forward. If you just see it as a means to earn extra money and you're not that bothered about helping people, then yeah, we hope you pass part 3, but no, you stopping with LDC is probably not the right choice for you. You need to join you know, the vast majority of instructors who are basically on their own. You know, all our instructors are independent, but they've chosen not to be alone. They've chosen to be part of a team, the LDC team of excellence, if you like, for want of a better term. So I think I've said it enough for now. Hopefully you haven't got so bored that you haven't been able to get through this video, and hopefully that nothing I've said that's actually put you off the course and has helped to reassure you going forward. So thank you for now, and no doubt you will see me in other videos, and you may well see me in various workshops to do with the franchise when you're further down the line. So bye for now.